Hi, folks. Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Barry, I am so grateful for the opportunity to speak across continents with you today. Thank you so much for the heart that you bring to this work. And welcome to Next Economy Now.
Thanks, Erin. This is fun.
So we are just so grateful that Small Giants exists. And I wanted to start out asking you to describe in your own words, what is Small Giants, and a little bit about your theory of change. And if you want to back up and start with who you are and how you came to this, that's great.
Okay, we'll start with all the small questions. My story leads into Small Giants in a really unique way. I inherited financial capital when my father passed away when I was very young. I was 14. My dad was 45 at the time of his death, which was tragically young, and had not really thought about legacy planning because you don't think about it when you're young and fit and healthy. And so I was left with a legacy of A, financial capital, but B, really, what do you do with that? And because I was so young, I grew into those questions as I was an artist, a musician, an actor, a photographer, a writer, a playwright, and I pursued that. And I went to the Victorian College of the Arts, and I thought that I would really ignore the inheritance and just be an arts practitioner because I love making things and connecting with people in that way from an embodied place. And I thought, I'll deal with the financial capital when I'm 25 and ancient. And I got to 25 pretty quickly, and I'd been living in Los Angeles, working in film as a screenwriter and a schlepper on set, and I directed my first short film, and I'd loved every minute of it, and I was really on the pathway to get an Oscar. Like, that's how I was imagining my future, and I was ambitious and hungry for that kind of success because I thought it would be commensurate with my inheritance. Like, if I did something that big and that epic, then it would cancel out the inheritance. I would have proven on my own that I was as awesome as the legacy, which is what you do, I think, when you're young. And luckily, at the exact intersection of me turning 24, 25 is when I met my husband, Danny, who when we got together, had just graduated from aerospace engineering and was, he's deeply a social justice activist and an eco-warrior and a systems thinker as an engineer. And he was given an assignment in his final year at engineering where the assignment was essentially to design a bomber jet that could take off and land with 100 kilo of missiles, dispensing with the 100 kilo of missiles mid-air and landing. So they had to design the gear and the plane and everything. And as the grandson of a Holocaust survivor, he went to his professor and he said, that's outrageous. I refuse to do this assignment. Context is everything. Why can't the assignment be design a plane that can carry 100 kilo of food for a community in need after a cyclone or a natural disaster and you can't get to that community, so why can't that be the context of this assignment? The same mechanics, the same engineering, but really the context creates our world and our framing. And he was told to do the assignment as it was written, but it sowed the seed in something in him, which was that we had to change the context. We had to frame what we were designing and why to create the world we want to live in, not cater to the world that we see in front of us, which is based on, paradigms of fear and scarcity. So we came together at an amazing time in our lives where I had this unique legacy and Dan brought his own unique legacy, and the two of us together was a bit of magic. We started to ask questions like, how could we use our financial capital to contribute meaningfully to the world? How could we do that? Like, could business be a force for good in the world? Could we flip the model? Could we actually be thinking of abundance, reverence, and trust as structural ideas, and then use financial capital to serve our highest goals, our highest values, not our lowest? And what would that look like? And because of the way Dan thinks, he's like, what would that look like structurally? Like, let's go all the way upstream. And when we started Small Giants, actually it started out of a response to an inconvenient truth. I was heavily pregnant with our first child, Amos, and we were watching An Inconvenient Truth, and I couldn't bear it. I could not bear it any longer, and I got up to leave the cinema. And I said, I was tears streaming down my face, and I said, I just can't do this. We're about to bring our first child into the world. This is insane. I can't bear witness to this. And Dan said, sit back down. We're going to watch it together. We're going to hold hands. And when we're finished, we're going to think about what our response is, not our reaction. Mm. And as Al Gore said, between denial and despair, there is action. And our action was Small Giants. We understood that we had to use everything we had to lean our shoulder to the wheel of change and to at least make an attempt in this one glorious, very short life that we get to make a promise to our kids that we really tried to move the dial. And Small Giants was born. So basically Small Giants is it's very hard to describe. If I were to try to describe it, I would say it's an impact family office. We are 100% impact investors, so we use all of our financial capital in service to people, planet, and profit. So triple bottom line investments. And really, as an experiment and a think tank and an action tank for how we can align our deepest selves with what we do and overall create the world we want to leave for our children and our grandchildren. And it's not a traditional portfolio where you have 95% of it unconsciously invested for the purpose of profit and extraction. And then maybe with 5%, you give some of your money away sometimes to some charitable causes. That's old and late capitalism paradigms where you can have that dissonance. the model that we're engaging in, there can't be that dissonance. And so it's thrilling, but it's really hard.
I'm so appreciative that you shared that story to begin with, the many-fold stories, because I think so often we create these false constructs where people who don't have access to wealth and resources think, if only I had $1 million, I could actually make a difference. If only I had more resources, I could change the world in a meaningful way. And I think where we are right now is that it's a lot more than just money or just a certain type of power. We're at a moment in history where we have to flip everything on its head, as you said. So I'm appreciative of you bringing a fuller perspective to what it's going to take.
Everybody in any context, anywhere in the world, always has an if only clause, right? If you have or you don't have, I mean, I know so many people who have a lot and internally they are impoverished, and therefore it never matters how much they have in their bank account. They never have enough. If you are asking the question, how much is enough? The answer is it's never enough, because the inner life and the inner world is not being cultivated at the same time as the outer world. The doing and the being need to come together for us to really both grieve what we have destroyed with the current economic paradigms we're living within. I mean, in order for there to be, an infinite growth curve, as everyone's taught in Harvard Business School, it correlates and is fundamentally dependent upon an ever-decreasing and depleting natural world. The extraction of resources and the complete unconscious development of everything is how we get that endless growth curve. And only if you are asleep at the wheel do you still think that's a good operating system.
Yeah.
And I think that, if only it were true that if you had $1 million, you would change the world. Because with money, with an understanding of how money is energy, and we direct it with the story we tell ourselves about who we are and how we can interact with one another. Money does what we tell it to do. And it's a huge responsibility to be accountable for what your money does in the world while you sleep at night.
So I want to, in a minute, go into some of the exciting investments that you're inspired by through Small Giants. But because you brought it up, let's go there. How do you think you are, maybe it's on a daily basis or a weekly basis, what practices are you taking around your relationship with money that maybe our listeners could also adopt or that could support them in their journey? Because I think you're hitting on something that is right on, and it's, how do we transform our relationship with money, no matter how much of it you have?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to come to a place that you fully accept that your relationship with money is subjective and that it is based on story. It is the story that we were told by, Ayn Rand, literally in Fountainhead, or Milton Friedman, or John Stuart Mills, Adam Smith. Like, we are the byproduct of hundreds of years of Western philosophical foundational theory on how we should organise ourselves. And it's not the only way that we can organise ourselves. And once you feel safe enough, you've sort of jumped off the cliff of that understanding that these are all just a set of ideas that we've adopted and accepted to be true. Once we accept that that does not have to be true, we're driving off the cliff of the biosphere. Like, if we are, as Kate Raworth says, able to reimagine not an endless growth curve, but reimagine the economy in a donut so that we live within the bounds of the ecology and towards human flourishing. If that's something we can accept is possible, which I believe it is, we've got a hell of a lot of hard work ahead of us. So the first thing is to sort of break with the fantasy and the mythology around what money is, how we relate to it, the banking system, the globalized economy. They're all constructs that can be challenged and must be challenged if we're, we've hit the end of the road of that story where 8 white men own more wealth than half of the planet. That's the end of a story. We drove that all the way to the wall. And now how can we get back to that idea that we can all flourish with not just, and where financial capital is not a god. It's become a real Mayan god at the center of our ideology about how we connect with one another or don't connect with one another. So social capital, love capital, financial capital, there are so many, the valuing of all kinds of capital is something that really needs to be held by all of us a bit more. And daily, I do a lot more than I ever used to do of practices of being in my body, like from Pilates and yoga to just being in nature. The more I am in my body, in nature, the more I can be in awe and remember myself, like remember my place in the scheme of things. And that humility helps with the hubris that we might know what we're doing and be, masters of the universe. The best thing in my life, aside from being in my body, I meditate a lot. I keep really good company. We're, stewards. None of us are entitled. I mean, one of the most interesting things about inheriting money, the way that I did, is that for me, the interpretation that came to me really, really quickly was that this was not my entitlement. It was a privilege, and that I was a steward. This wasn't a right handed down to me to lord over others, but and I think that's true for all of us. We are stewards for the next generation, or we are criminals to take from future generations' capacity to thrive because we wanted an iPhone so that we could be on Instagram all night. We've kind of lost perspective. You got me started. Oh, you got me started on a really big topic. I segue. I'm so deeply immersed in all of it at the moment, thinking about it and writing about it. So, yeah, because I think it's at the core of asking ourselves, who do we want to be? What is the story of humanity going forward? And I contemplate those things all the time.
It's so crucial. So let's go there. Let's go to that hopeful place. I'm so struck by looking at the portfolio of companies, everything from hazelnuts in Bhutan to home scale biodigester for energy. And I'm curious if there are a couple investments from Small Giants that you're particularly excited by that you'd like to share.
I'm excited by everything we do. I'm loving working at the moment. I've been focusing. So, we invest a lot in media, storytelling. So Dumbo Feather, the work that we're doing there, and the School of Life with emotional intelligence and public discourse and platforms. That stuff's really interesting. But I'm actually really excited about the built environment. At the moment, it's a super intriguing 3-dimensional Rubik's Cube of a puzzle, which is, you and I were even talking about it just briefly before, that the ideal scenario is we don't destroy nature, that we have a tract of land and that we could, retrofit our urban environments to be more conducive to everything we talked about with flourishing ecology and community. So that I find that interesting. Like, how do you literally design in where you opt into any built environment? It's all a construct, right? So how do we opt in our best selves? Connection to nature, connection to ourselves, and connection to each other. Like, how do we start building buildings, multi-res developments? Sounds like the old economy, but it's got to look really new, where, when you walk into a space and you feel good, you just feel good and held. What is that? What are the elements that make that true, that create that experience. And you know, on the other side, when you walk into a space that feels scary and cold and empty, and you could not show up with your most vulnerable and fullest self in that space. What are those elements? And I think just being a conscious property developer, like, what does that mean? I'm thrilled by that. Just all the questions are thrilling. How can we invest in a hopeful future? And how consciously can we do that? Like, how far can we push ourselves to say, what's the best vision of the future we could possibly have, and then go and do that? And I don't think it is, you know, the individualist, capitalist, late 20th century, early 21st century model where it's the hero's journey, you know, where one guy owns the whole company, determines the whole direction of everything, and no matter what his mental health, no matter what his emotional well-being, the company, which couldn't be worth $8 billion, it can be worth $100 billion, as is currently the case with Amazon. We all become society is now at the mercy of those conditions, and has always been, really. When corporations are protected, not people, it's a problem. But I think we can reimagine it. And those of us who have access to power or financial capital in particular, can help steer new structures. I love B Corporation. We're a B Corp. I think that these are all attempts at that reconvening. How can we all get around the table on these issues in new ways, in creative ways, and undo a lot of the damage that we have done to this point, and maybe come from a truly regenerative new platform. I'm inspired to think about that. That's where the hope comes for me. There is something here in hospicing the old to midwife the new. What does that mean? You know, there's a lot of grief in acknowledging that we have cut down the Amazon to service hamburgers. Like, if we actually got proximate to that level of suffering, that level of destruction, it's overwhelming. You know, it causes despair. If we were to really, really say, oh, that is actually what we're doing. We are incentivizing the destruction of our true economy. Economy means, I think the original Greek was, you know, housekeeping, the care of our home. And I don't think the human moral imagination has gotten to a place yet where it understands that the planet itself is the economy. The ecology cannot be separated from the economy. And currently it's absolutely bifurcated right down the middle. Never the twain shall meet, but of course they do. So I'm interested in designing an economy that really has that whole planet in mind, and also has the health and well-being of community in mind. So we try and do that in all the sectors we're invested in. I mean, we're in renewable energy, regenerative agriculture. That really blows my mind. We've got one of our projects is an in-conversion biodynamic farm called Mossy Willow Farm. And that's been one of the most restorative and inspiring projects we've ever done for me, just to really understand soil and water. I mean, it gets you really close, like right up to the coalface of climate change. We feed 60 families and about 5 restaurants with the food production from our farm. And that information really informs how we develop property, you know, how we have a financial services business, you know, trying to build our humanity back into the systems, into the sectors. It's a bit of reverse engineering. So the reverse engineering, the hospicing the old economy is very challenging. It's full of potholes, basically because it's an ecosystem, not an ecosystem. You know, it's about fighting each other for resources and profit. The stuff that really turns me on is where we could possibly go and how we could pivot. We are interdependent. We just haven't quite acknowledged that. You know, we really, really desperately somehow wanted to, it was our hubris. We wanted to be masters of the universe. And We even talk about our own bodies and our own brains as mechanistic. The pendulum is swinging back. We understand that they're harmful ideologies, and something new needs to emerge so that we can, I think, like me, take the legacy of previous generations, which includes ideologies, and say, okay, so where to from here? Like, what is the vision? What do we want this world to look like? Do we want it to be divided along tribal lines and around water scarcity, where we're going to be at war with one another? Because we refused to acknowledge that we were altering weather patterns and depleting water tables and destroying forests in service to, like, goods and services, consumerism. It's a kind of psychosis, and we just need to like enough now, I feel like we need now to really invest in new covenants with one another, new agreements. Also, our media has really, the media that we consume from the internet to, the front page of the paper, it feeds a part of us that is not constructive. It feeds a part of us that gets addicted and despairing. It feeds paralysis and indecision and hopelessness. So we really do. Krista Tippett, who's got the incredible podcast On Being, she really puts it quite remarkably that we need to orient towards those who are thinking and feeling, our way out of the mess, spiritual creatives, wisdom keepers who are doing the hard work of transformation, and understand that in that piece we really need to grieve what has been lost and reclaim what is useful and then move forward from that place. But I was saying before that the company I keep is a really important piece to staying on the path. Yeah, I hang out with people who are way better humans than I am, like people who are, so they inspire me to be better every day, and they elevate me all the time so that I lift my head up, I lift my eyes up, and they're people who live lives where they're of service as well. So it's amazing when you put love and money in the same sentence. It has a real dissonance that I think is useful right now. There's an amazing crew of thought leaders and wisdom keepers in the US who are Jubilee. They're really, really awesome, really inspiring. Yeah, love them. And, there's Charlie and Lisa Kleisner with the Tonic Network, and the B Corp guys, Jay, Andrew and Bart. John Fullerton with the Capital Institute. He's remarkable. Krista Tippett with what she's doing at On Being. The list goes on, because it's not just wealth holders, but it's anyone trying to navigate the business world or the world of financial capital with higher consciousness, trying to come at it from love and empathy. This is the age of empathy in the new economy. That's really what I believe. And hanging out with all of those kinds of people or having connections to them just gives you the fuel you need to keep going, because the forces that would resist that kind of change are in positions of power right now in the world, in some places. And it's whether, the only thing that can, sometimes make me want to stay home some days is whether we'll be in time, whatever that means, but whether we'll be in time for the change that's needed.
Yeah. I'm feeling very humbled by the gratitude for being able to talk across continents with somebody who's such a thinker, such an inspiration to me. And I feel like every time we speak, we met talking about barter and gift economy, and every time we speak, I feel really enlightened and like I learn a lot from you. So thank you.
Erin, thank you. You've given me the privilege of being on the podcast, but you should be telling all your listeners about the incredible way you're living with such intention and authenticity. I think the economy I'm talking about, which I don't even know what it looks like yet. Like, it's emerging. Everyone's trying to think our way through this, right? But you're living your whole life in a gift economy. You're trying to live the principles of a gift economy. That is radical. That is so wild. Like the wealth of the true wealth of information and understanding that you're gleaning from that, which is a relationship-based economy. It's non-transactional. That's so profound. If all of us lived in gift economy, wow, the world would heal very, very quickly. So what you're doing is hugely inspiring to us, and maybe we've got it all wrong. I'm completely open to that possibility. But what I do got me in conversation with you, and that is the true wealth of our life's work, that we are connected to inspiring human beings around the world who are leading with love and trying to bring their best selves to be of service to the world. That's what it's all about. We might get it wrong all along the way, the how we do it, but at least there's an attempt to do it. So I'm blown away by that and by you, and yeah.
I think it's definitely a both and. I really do. And one of the things that the gift economy teaches is how to operate with a recalibration of our expectations of what return is, or what liquidity is, or what ROI is. And one of the questions that I'm continuing to hold is how you infuse those principles in Small Giants with recalibrating expectations of exit or liquidity or return.
Yeah, we don't go into businesses with exit in mind. Our ROI there's a whole scale. Like we've got sort of measurements around what is success to us. That's our number one question. Like, what is success for this business, for us? But the recalibration happens inside of us. Like, that's where the big seismic shift is. The real shocking revelation of this work is that the recalibration happens on the inside. And then when you have, we've got quite a big team of people that we work with, there's a very high level of emotional intelligence in the team, because when the recalibration happens, we all recalibrate together, and it's big work. Like, it's unpacking and undoing so much that we've been told is true. And if we want to change things, well, then really everything's up for grabs, right? How we value things is up for grabs, and we need to analyze and assess things really daily, weekly, monthly, annually, constantly excavating our expectations. Like, where do our expectations for ROI even come from, and what is return? And also, if we could just discuss WTF with everybody from the old economy thinking that they understand risk return. Your risk analysis cannot externalize the planet and community, which it has been doing to date. So what happens when you bring all of that in to your portfolio and you're like, realize that we all impact one another, that we are in a constant ricocheting effect where we're trying, like, I was watching a movie the other night, I think it was like The Bourne Legacy or something. I love the Bourne movies. And in it, there's a military act that's taken by drone. So these guys are in a room somewhere and they're using a drone to kill one of their own agents. And because it's on the computer, it's a fucking video game. Like, it's a video game. There is no proximity anymore. We can opt out of giving a shit. We can dislocate our humanity from our actions now. And as we're heading up against discussions around artificial intelligence and virtual reality, we need to get real fast. And we need to pull the reins on our own hubris, because if there's enough for everyone's need but not for everyone's greed, that might be okay. Maybe that's okay. But I think a lot of people who like are hanging on hard to some old ideas, will find that incredibly threatening. I just don't think it's okay to have an amazing dress that is directly connected to the suffering of others. Like to be consuming my goods like that drone attack, the drone assassination in that movie. We're not drones. Everything we do affects the planet or another person, and we need to recalibrate that and say that we won't accept that in ourselves and between ourselves. And that's a really big conversation that I'm really hoping we have in the deepest way, and that we stay proximate to one another and we don't opt out of our humanity. And the economy and financial capital is a really powerful way to force that dialogue and to force that exchange. We could talk for hours and days about this stuff.
Right. You're absolutely right. The economy is a forcing function because we've used it as a proxy to meet our needs, and now we have to find other ways to meet our needs, not mediated by financial transactions. So
you said we are either stewards or we're criminals.
Yep.
And I think the truth is that the paradox is sometimes we're both at the same time. And
no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. I think I said that because it's, like everything in life, it's partly true part of the time. And paradox, I think, is constantly at play. And we have a really hard time with paradox. So I, come from a high net worth background, and I live in a big house, and I'm a warrior for the future, a healer. I can say all those things about myself, but at the same time, I use more resources than probably 50 families in Cambodia. More probably. So there's no natural justice. Paradox has to be held with open hands, because we are all flawed and crawling our way to some kind of social and environmental justice that we imagine on the horizon. And we'll get somewhere halfway between, an ideal vision and the massive crisis we're in now. Last week, I flew up with my kids and my husband to the Great Barrier Reef to sit in circle with scientists and experts on the reef, political activists, business people. We all flew up. We swam on the reef and had a look at it. And in the last 2 years, since 2015, 50% of the Great Barrier Reef has died. So I'm just feeling that, and we don't mean to be criminals, I don't think, but it is criminal that we sit in denial and we insist on our old systems and the old paradigms. We insist on them, and I understand why, because they created so much certainty for such a long time. I'd say 2 generations have been feeding on a system of post-World War reparation and restoration of the fabric of human trust, and then it broke down in the late 20th century and early 21st century. And what we weren't talking about is the breakdown of the ecosystems around us, and that as the systems around us break down, it puts enormous pressure on us, our nervous systems, and partly they say that whole war in Syria, Thomas Friedman wrote an amazing piece about how the war in Syria, follow the water shortages and you'll find the reason for the war. Yeah. So, yes, I made a big statement about if you're not, active for change and active on the part of Mother Earth and our fragile natural ecosystems, then you're a criminal. I meant that because I'm angry and because I'm grief-stricken, and because once you've sort of, taken the pill and you've left the matrix, you look back at everybody having, sipping lattes and wearing Gucci shoes, and you go, we are the most vile creatures. We have consciousness, but we would choose not to access it. We would choose not to fully own our consciousness. It's a big call. I get it. It takes a lot of work to wake up and then to cope and bear with the grief once you look at, sorry about the dinging from my computer. That's really annoying. I don't know how to turn it off. I'm a tech. Just
You can edit it out.
Yeah, I don't know what to say other than I think that future generations will look back at this time with horror. And I don't know what their future will be. And that's the thing, we also don't know. We don't know what the future is going to be like. But I can tell you now, the Great Barrier Reef is nearly dead. And when the Great Barrier Reef dies, fisheries and ecosystems underwater around the world are in big fucking trouble. And it's not the front page of the New York Times. And it's not the front page even of the Australian or the Age or any of those papers, because it doesn't serve, I don't know who it doesn't serve to not report and not talk about it. Maybe Kim Jong-un and Trump are more compelling media stories, but they're not the main story of our time. So I go to bed with that at night, I guess. Does that answer your question?
I think that we all are in that question, and sitting in the non-answer of it is okay. And I'm curious if that unsettling question informs and how it informs investment decisions and how you become the media too, through your outlets with Dumbo Feather and how you share the stories.
What was the question that you extrapolated from that?
How do we manage our own expectations around toggling back and forth from steward space to utilizing the tools at hand that often implicate us in the degradation of the planetary resources?
I think that a sense of humour probably is really important. A sense of playfulness. I think that the minute we lose our playfulness and our ability to have fun and laugh, we're in trouble too. Because, I was watching Rise of the Guardians, this amazing kids kids movie. It's about Jack Frost and Santa and the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny, and they all get together. It's brilliant. And the nemesis is the boogeyman. And anyway, they have this big thing where all children's dreams are taken and the Sandman is killed and all this sort of stuff, and suddenly nightmares become the main prevailing situation on the planet. Nightmares rule. And this one boy sustains a belief in magic and the magical. And there's this whole big thing. But basically, Jack Frost comes up with the solution as the world becomes crushed by darkness and dark forces. Everyone starts to lose their power. And Jack Frost goes, hang on a minute, we're not playing. And he creates this wild, playful romp through the snow, and he makes everything snowy, and everyone starts laughing and playing, and an enormous amount of release comes from the play. And I watched it yesterday and I was like, yes, of course, because depression and paralysis just doesn't have any creativity in it. And it doesn't help. And we're going to have to contain paradox. Like, we're going to, I am a part of the extractive economy just because I can't opt out of everything. Like, I try to audit my whole life, my businesses, where they're all big corporations. They all run on, renewable energy. They've all got ethical super plans for all of my staff. I, recycle water, all the things. Like, we all try to do all the bits and bobs, but ultimately the system around us pre-opts us into extractive economy behaviour. So I think we have to hold some seriously uncomfortable hospicing of the old system in order to midwife the new. That is excruciating, because I wish we were pre-opted into our best selves. I wish we were pre-opted into social harmony, but you actually have to implement the systems that enable social harmony. And I think libertarianism and a whole lot of ideas around the individual over the community, the idea of the self, that Ayn Rand whole stream of thought. Don't get me wrong, I've read all her books. She's a whopping storyteller. But if that's the story of humanity, we don't care for each other in that version of it. We care for materialism, and we care for what I can get out of this over what you can get. And when we head down that path, we're in a lot of trouble. Now, I'm a businesswoman as well, so I'm not anti-capitalism, but I'm anti the capitalism that we currently find ourselves in. I actually don't know what the future system will be called, but it should be something new, something that keeps us within the bounds of the ecology and towards human flourishing. That's all I know. Is it possible? I don't know. Do we have to live in paradox? Yes. It's really, 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 really hard, because we have to strive for a world that is not only sustainable, but I don't even like the word sustainable anymore. I like words like flourishing. And when we think of how can we build systems where all of us can flourish, not just a few of us, and even put aside ideas around socialism, capitalism, all that sort of jazz, which is so 20th century, it bores me, and mostly, except for Ayn Rand, who had strange influence, mostly constructed by men. If we're extracting resources the way that we're doing, the Great Barrier Reef, that's all I can think about this week, is if we're doing what we're doing to the death of ecosystems that sustain life, that's a lay down misère. Like, I don't know what we're all quibbling about or even wondering about. This is our time. This is our crisis. It's like a world war, except in ecosystem sort of terms. Anyway, you got me started, Erin. Yeah.
You touched on decision making in the context of the urgency. I'm curious how you do it at Small Giants, Dumbo Feather. Do you incorporate collective decision making? How do you negotiate even all the needs internal to an organization?
Look, we're a very collegiate environment, so we're all always talking and sharing with one another. What have you read? What have you seen? What are you reflecting on? What's moving you at the moment? Those are all, we have a very communal kitchen in the building, so we're all always talking about what is generative for everyone in all the different businesses. And we have lots of communal gatherings spaces in the business, in buildings, sorry. But ultimately, the vision was set a long time ago. It's how can we use all of our resources to repair and restore and regenerate through the economy, through financial capital, and then through social capital and cultural capital and love capital. So we really, everyone in all the businesses is working towards the same mission through different sectors. And Dumbo Feather, the editor and I will sit down and say, we reckon these are the themes we should focus on for the year, and we'll get consensus around that. If everyone's excited, we go with something. We have what we call guardians of purpose. So we don't have board meetings. We have guardians of purpose gatherings. And those are really important filters for our decision making, because everyone who's involved, all the guardians are protecting or working towards the mission always, not towards their little chunk of the pie. It's not the finance team or the legal team or because those things have primacy in the old system that are absurd. We should be protecting the purpose first. Everyone should be. And then if it serves the purpose, we go ahead. So that's maybe one we go into the technical, how we do it.
And just going back to the pain and tragedy of the Great Barrier Reef, which we're dealing here on the north coast of California, where they are called the urchin barrens, and we've lost 95% of our kelp forests, the giant macrocystis kelp forests in the past 5 years, which are our reef that protects the otters and protects them from sharks and fertilizes all the life on our coasts. Boy, this Guardians of Purpose feels like such a lens on, if we have purpose paramount and we have alignment around the vision, then we don't have to limit ourselves. It's almost like it opens up pathways to actually standing up to the call of the crisis and the times that we're living in. What
all I can say is yes.
What has that learning, that visiting the reef, where is the energy moving in you right now around that?
I spent many days very depressed and grief-stricken and shocked and paralyzed and just like sick to my stomach and completely overwhelmed. Like we're legit fucked. So I'm not quite sure what to do next. And I took my babies there. You know, my children are 10, 8 and 5. I was looking at them and we were on this idyllic island looking at the sunset, and I knew what was going on under the water. I'm like, we were paddleboarding on the sunset. It was beautiful. And I was like, what the actual fuck are we going to do? And there was nothing to do. I think I felt like there was nothing to do. Like there was not a fix-it moment for me. I couldn't go to a fix-it, because the fix-it is like shifting global consciousness to care enough. That's the fix-it, right? I can't like grab a bucket fast enough to like put water on the fire, you know? So where I am now is really really practicing a sort of listening and stillness, calling out to my community, to all the wisdom keepers and the spiritual creatives, because I don't think that all the technical doers actually, we can't fix this problem with the same mindset that created it. So I think higher consciousness is required, and I think ethics and values and core intention needs to be pretty, it needs to be called forth right now. And I also think that leaning into earth, like leaning into nature and listening, there's something in it. I don't know what to tell you without sounding like a massive hippie, but there's actually some serious strength and listening to be gained from trusting in intention and having that intention and walking with that intention every day. And that's why I'm talking to you. I don't love the idea of mass communication in terms of Instagram and Facebook, and I don't like the fact that they're private companies owned by individuals who don't share my values. Yes, and we need each other. We need to find each other, and we need to link arms. I would say I am pretty certain now that Thich Nhat Hanh, he quoted that the next Buddha would be, actually I think Buddha said that the next Buddha would be community. So I'm talking to you, this is a call out to anyone who is tapped into their power and to their heart space and their head space, that now is the time to be your own guru. Like, we cannot look for leadership outside of ourselves. Each one of us, all 8 billion of us, well, there'll be a whole lot of people who can't rise because they're in survival, or they don't have the mental health or the physical health. But even if you don't have the physical health, if you have mental and emotional health, now is the time for all of us to be Buddha together and link arms. And even if you can't move, you sit in deep meditation and sending an energetic of love and resilience and strength out into the world. We can shift consciousness, I think, quite quickly. And we have to somehow lean into that at the same time as doing. So in my everyday, like, I couldn't be doing more. That's the problem. You know, I'm like, I've devoted my whole life to all the sectors: renewable energy, sustainable property development, regenerative agriculture, emotional intelligence, and, you know, public discourse on that kind of resilience and building that fabric. Like, I'm coming at it with my husband, Dan, and all of our team. We're coming at it from every angle we can. So that's why when I go to the reef, I'm like, holy shit, I can't do more. There is no more doing that, say, me, Barry, could do. If you out there are listening to this and you can do more, you can align your life with your values, and I would hope that those values are to be of service to the planet and community. So if you're not doing enough, do more. But once you've maxed out on the doing, I think it's time for all of us to plug into the being. Who are we as a human cohort, and who do we want to become? And but we have the medicine for our time. So all of us need to be that medicine. And that's the approach is multi-layered. I definitely know that the head cannot solve these problems, that an engineering, patriarchal, fully masculine perspective, it can't, because that's how we got into this. So there is a huge place, and I'm just going to have to use the language. I know it's uncomfortable for rationalists to accept words like sacred and feminine, but there is something in it. And I am trying to lean right on in there and say that abundance, reverence, and trust are structural, and they are sacred, and they are feminine. Intention. That we could live in a system that had abundance, reverence, and trust rather than scarcity and fear at its core. It sounds lofty, but, like, to be honest, when the barrier reef is dying at a rate of knots and the kelp forests along the Californian coasts are like nearly dead, we kind of need to get real lofty. And we need to move fast, and we need to move together. So,
Barry, thank you for this medicine. May it go out to all those change makers who are doing at max capacity what they can do, and that they may be as well. Thank you so much for touching all the sectors that you do. Those words were definitely medicine for me after a very long, busy day. Also trying to move forward different pieces, whether it be oceans or climate beneficial housing as a drawdown strategy. Collaborators are standing at the ready, our listeners, your readers of Dumbo Feather. Thanks for being in this.
Oh, thank you, guys. And maybe I'll also call out and say, I think we need a global Guardians of Purpose, a global wisdom council. And I've been dreaming about it for years. I think it needs to happen. I don't know how it would happen, but if your readers or listeners want to call out to me or to you, and we can all start thinking about it. I'm not on Facebook or any of the social media things, so it's a bit uncomfortable. I'm a bit old school. But ideas are welcome, and I would encourage that we gather globally. So one of the things that I love about Trump and his milieu is that none of our nation states are going to solve this. We must become citizens of the planet together, and protect it together, and protect one another together. And we need to let go of orienting towards, single male or even female leaders. So let's find a way to be guardians of purpose together. And maybe, I don't know, I love the idea of all change makers meditating and breathing together, for 20 minutes a day at 8 o'clock at night, which is I don't know what time. I love the idea of all of us really trusting that if we get back to breath and stay in our bodies and connect to one another, that's where we will get our strength. So anyway, that's a little call out. I'm always interested to see how everyone else thinks we can strengthen together.
And the best way for our listeners to stay in contact is reaching out to Dumbo Feather, or
Oh my God.
Subscribing to your podcast, buying the magazine.
Yes. Subscribe to the Dumbo Feather podcast. It's free. And get the magazine for sure. I am on, I'm uncontactable. But you could get in touch with info@smallgiants.com.au. That you could do that. Don't write to me for a job though. We're maxed out. We're maxed out.
Make your own job in service of the next economy.
Amen. And serve the community where you live and love, and serve the environment where you live and love. Because we need the network of us, the mycelium network of us, to be global right now, so that we can hold the grief and hold the resilience and hold a vision for the future that is hopeful. Because the dark forces that exist within us and without will do everything to squash that hopefulness. And cynicism is one of the ways. And that's really fucking boring. I mean, it's like super boring. Who wants to live in darkness and lack of hope? But it is a kind of emotional shutdown that human beings are prone to do. So for those of us who, like Brene Brown talks about, the wholehearted, for those of us who can kind of like stay with the program, it's incumbent on us to help everyone orient towards a hopeful future. Maybe the next podcast I should interview you about the gift economy, because there's a lot of stuff in there that would be a great follow-up to this. Yeah.
Would love that. Well, I know that your listeners will be very intrigued by this new edition of Dumbo Feather, the new economy, the next economy. Thank you so much for bringing your heart, for bringing these ideas forth, for paying attention to leaders in this space, and for doing the personal work, the personal growth. It truly is a joy to speak with you this afternoon, and thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, Erin. It was so nice to see your beautiful smiling face, and I hope to see you again soon.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.